Well, I made a bunch of short videos and put on YouTube. Just going over my daily driver. I figured I'd make a longer video and I'll load it. So this truck, and the reason I figured I'd do this, I was working on a Dodge pickup, and I seemed like a lot of people liked looking at it. So this truck, though, I've owned it for about 13 years. You can see the bed doesn't match the cab. It's got over 400,000 miles on it. It's missing the back bumper, and I had a Dodge pickup that I was selling that had a bad back bumper on it, so I took the bumper off this truck and put it on the one I was selling so it would sell a little better. Look at this guy. Good grief. This bumper, I put it on here 10 or 12 years ago. It was I was up in Alaska, headed out of Delta Junction towards Tok, Alaska, and a herd of bison ran out right in front of me, and they ended up killing 3 of them. So I put a real bumper on after that deal. And these steps, I made these steps. They're not the best, but when I made them, I didn't want to spend $800 some odd on steps, so just built some of my own. Had a tree fall on it right here up in Alaska. Fell on it there, and it caught that other corner right there. I got a deal for your gooseneck trailers, little toolbox, 100-gallon fuel tank. Typical old tore up driver seat. This has been reupholstered one time before. Need to get it done again. The bezel here on the dash is nicely broken. And then the dashboard itself, so this is an OEM dash. It's an OEM dash that I found without any cracks or breaks, because mine was broke. So I took my old dash all out of here, and I had a little bit of foam put underneath, and then put this vinyl on there. Someday I'll get the rest of the interior to match it the way I want to. I did have this redone, and I put a little bit of a lip. Keeps your phone from sliding off. Back seats, typical kids. Look at that, chips. Yep, jackets. Then miles, I'll show you the miles here. We got 401,917. So those aren't accurate, because the reason I say they're not accurate is because the speedometer, it did not work for over a year. It just wouldn't work. It never moved, and the odometer didn't work either, obviously. So for over a year, it didn't work, and I was running 70 miles a day commuting from home to work. So 70 miles a day was the commute, and that plus these tires are a bit taller. So that's, I figured, about best I figured, the closest numbers, they're about 10%. So it reads 10% low. So my best guess is I've got close to 450,000 miles on this truck. Original 6-speed manual transmission. I'm on the 3rd clutch. The first clutch that was in it was just a clutch from Napa, the clutch that was in it when I bought it, and it was a good clutch. Lasted like, I can't remember how many years. Then I put the second clutch would have been something I got from O'Reilly. Horrible clutch, worst thing I ever put in it. And then I put a Napa clutch back in it, but when I was pulling anything heavy, it would slip the clutch. So after I rebuilt the motor, I went ahead and put a dual disc clutch. So now it has a dual disc clutch in it. At about 400,000 miles, I rebuilt this motor. So this is now bored 20 over. It's got the fleece coolant bypass. It's got a Hamilton towing cam, Hamilton 103 pound valve springs. It's got Hamilton push rods and tappets. It's got Borg Warner K27 turbo. 100 horse injectors. That's the original injector bodies. I just put new injector tips on the injectors. I had, so they're Bosch injector bodies. They were the RV275s, and I pulled the tips off and put 100 horse tips on. The VP44 that's in here is the same pump that's been on this truck since I bought it 13 years ago. So that pump has easily over 200,000 miles on it. I've never replaced the VP on this. Even after I rebuilt the motor, I thought about putting a new pump, but I was like, well, it still works, so I'm gonna leave it in there. Radiator's been replaced. Intercooler is new, it was leaking. When I rebuilt the motor, I replaced the intercooler. The power steering gearbox is same gearbox, but I had it rebuilt by Benchworks out in Arizona. They put it's 3/4 ton valving and 1/2 ton gearing, so it's turning is quicker lock to lock. I think it's about a 1/2 turn less. Quadzilla tuner, and then it's got a Vibratech fluid damper. I got Thurin coilover springs. They're a linear rate, they're not a progressive rate, so they stay soft all the way through. They don't get stiffer the further they compress. And then the Fox 2.0s are valved by Thurin to match the coil. And then I got Dodge off-road steering, so it's crossover steering with Heim joints, no more ball joints. This has been on my truck for 4 or 5 years. It's still going pretty good. So Heim joint, you got a tie rod that runs over to the other wheel over there with the Heim joint, and then it goes from that. So what makes it a crossover, because it goes from that hub over there, spindle, up here to the pitman arm right there. And then we got a Dodge off-road gearbox brace. So this gearbox brace braces the gearbox with, it's got a bearing here, and it extends the shaft of the gearbox, and it keeps, because they like to flex on these frames quite a bit. But the Dodge off-road one, instead of tying this frame over to that frame, and then when the frame twists, it's twisting on your gearbox. So this keeps it all just in the corner, and it still lets your frame twist without putting a bunch of stress or strain on the gearbox. And then I got the Dodge off-road crossover, or I mean what do you want to call it, track bar. So you got a Heim joint, it's adjustable, goes all the way down to the axle right down there, and then it lets me, with a little bit of lift that's on the front end, it lets me keep my axle center. Got the Fox 2.0 steering stabilizer. There's the motor, there's that Vibratech fluid damper. See if we can get on there. Not really. Anyway, that's a Vibratech fluid damper. It's got 4-inch drape pipe, and front end starting to leak a little bit of fluid there, which is fine with me because this front axle is actually out of a 98 and this truck is an 02. So my ABS light has been on the whole time I've owned it because there's no ABS speed sensors on the 98 front axle. The front bumper, I put that on there after, I think I already mentioned that, after hitting Bison. I got the sport headlight, so it's got 4 bulbs total, 2 and 2, and then it got a bright box, so it lets me keep the high beam and low beam on and the fog light on all at the same time. And it worked good for a little bit, but the problem was these housings, you can see they're kind of getting black. They're really cheap, they're off Amazon. The bright box quit working. I got off of Gino's garage, or something like that. This one's really melted. You can see how it's just done. So I wouldn't advise putting them anything like that on a truck like this. I like these air filters. They're just a Donaldson air filter. They're 45 bucks, 50 bucks at Napa. You can easily get a year and a half of life out of one of these and just replace it. I don't like that it's pulling in hot air from under the hood, but they're a cheap filter. They hold a ton of dirt. They last forever, and they're not. You go look at the aftermarket filters, they want 800 bucks for a filter. That's 50 bucks, and my air's filtered, so it's not a race truck. I got different mirrors with the little lights. The paint is horrible, scratched. Clear's all coming off of it. Arizona did that. And then I put these mud flaps on when I was leaving Alaska pulling my camper. I didn't want to rock the daylights out of my camper. Those tail lights were on this bed when I bought the bed. Took the flatbed off and put the bed on, so not the tail lights I would have picked. Got some gauges. Those have been on there for a long time. Fuel pressure. You got the pyro and you got boost. As of right now, after rebuilding the motor, it does have a blown head gasket. It's fine if I just tool you around, but if I ever get after it, it starts to push coolant. You can see this coolant right here on the battery. You can see coolant splashed around there. I put these head bolts on from Power Driven Diesel. They got these head bolts, and they told me, they said those bolts are good for 50 pounds of boost. Well, they don't hold 40 pounds, or they didn't hold 40 pounds. So I'm gonna pull that head off, stud it, put a new head gasket, and hope the head studs hold up to it. And then what else did we do to this thing? It is leaking oil out the exhaust manifold. It's got raw oil coming out of there. You can see that. I'm thinking, I'm not 100% sure, but I'm thinking that that raw oil is probably from valve stem seals letting oil past. I'm really not sure. I don't know what else I've got done on this thing, if I've covered everything. It's been a good old truck though. Not been a bad truck at all. Got the Fox shocks on the rear. It's got little airbag helpers. It's got some Fox shocks on the back. Oh yeah, it's got I got the fast sump on the bottom of the fuel tank, and it's got a draw straw that goes down in there, and all that does is let me run it all the way out of fuel. But it does help. But it was running out at a quarter tank. I'd run out of fuel at a quarter tank, and that fixed that. And now I can do about 600 miles to a tank if I'm empty, or just, you know, not pulling anything. The frame and everything's in pretty good shape. It's got the rear disc brakes, being that it's an 02 instead of drum brakes. It does have a fast lift pump. It's got the fast. It's got a fast pump on there, and then so far all the cab mounts are pretty good. The frame's in good shape. I don't really have any rust or rot or anything. I'm sure the day will come, but got a leak going on right there. That output shaft on this is, I've replaced that seal probably 4 times. I need to just get a new yoke and fix that. And I do have, so that red Dodge that I was working on, I changed the front axle out. This is the old axle that came out of that red Dodge, which is an 02. So So what I think I'll do is take this axle and completely strip it, and rebuild it and clean it all up. It's got the hubs that run the ABS speed sensors, and I'll just throw it underneath that truck. So take that 98 front axle out of that 02 truck and put an 02 front axle back in it. And someday, if I could ever find somebody, I'll get this truck painted. But trying to find somebody to paint a truck anymore is just about impossible. Anyway, there's a 2500, the 5.9 diesel, the VP44 with over 400,000 miles, and still gets driven pretty hard pretty much every day. Well, anyway, I gotta get back to work.